So great, we've got some microphones on the drums, we've got a few mics on the guitar amp, and in a little while we're going to just sort of get some sounds up, go into our recording, and just really quickly show you how to sort of manipulate the sound and get it evened out, get a nice sound going to the recording. I'm going to start by asking Connor to play some drums, and as he plays I'm going to sample each one of the microphones that we've put up, let you hear them, and then maybe I'll manipulate them just a little bit. So I'm going to ask him to start playing. I'm going to start with the one kick drum mic, that D112 that I talked about. Okay, Connor, let's go ahead and have you start playing. So there's that one D112, right? So I may just put a little equalization on this on the input channel here. And what I'll do is I'll just take the low mid frequency, because it sounds a little muddy, and I'll turn up the boost control all the way, and then I'll sort of sweep the frequencies, and I'll look for the ugly one, or listen for the ugly one. And I've located a frequency that sounds sort of ugly. I'll do that again. I'm going to sweep the frequencies on the bass drum. And there's that ugly frequency. So now I'm going to take the boost and cut control for that, and I'm going to cut it. Add a little bit on the bottom, and maybe a little bit of the stick sound on the top. So there was the bass drum without any overall equalizer. Here it is with adding a little bit on the bottom, a little bit on the top, and then deducting some from that muddy low frequency that we talked about. So now it sounds a little cleaner, a little bit more pristine. I'll listen on the big monitors. There we go. Perfect. Now I'll listen to the other microphone. There we have a little bit of a muddiness also, so I'll do a similar type of effect there. Now I'll listen to both of the kick drum mics together. Now here's without the equalization. You can hear they sound a little bit flat. Now here's with the equalization. There's a little bit of static there we heard because one of the knobs here is probably a little bit dirty, but no big deal. We'll clean it up. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the phasing of these two microphones. Earlier I was talking about if we have two mics for the same source, we want to make sure that the phasing relationship is correct, that both are going up at the same time and both are going down at the same time. One way for me to audibly hear that is by taking this phase reverse switch on the recording console, which you probably have on your mixer in Pro Tools, and it's just a little circle with a line through it like you see in your workbook, and I'll go ahead and press it down on one of the microphone channels. Again, I'll take it out, and I'll put it in. Listen to what happens when I take it out. It's a little thinner, right? And when I put it in, now we see it becomes a little more round, right? So that tells me that I need to keep that phase reverse switch in because we want the sound to be fuller and not smaller. When these two microphones are phased correctly, the sound is naturally going to be fuller if they both get combined. If they're not phased correctly, it'll get thinner or smaller. So I'm going to move on to my snare drum. There's my snare drum. Sounds pretty good. That's with no EQ. It actually sounded good because I added a little EQ before, so I'm going to put that back in. There we go. Again, I took some of this low mid frequency here, and I reduced some of it, right? So that's good. And then I'm going to listen to the bottom snare mic. Now this is the microphone I put under the snare drum. It's getting that nice snare sound to it. Level seems good. I'll listen to both of those together. Now again, I'm dealing with a phase reverse switch here, and if I take it out, we can hear the sound of the snare getting thinner, but I'm going to put it in, because as the snare compresses, one microphone is getting the upswing, the other microphone is getting the downswing at the same time, so we want to reverse that. Just suffice it to say, again, whenever we have two microphones on the same source, whether it's a guitar amp or a drum, we want to always check our phase by listening. We'll just audition both of the microphones with the phase switch off, and then turn one of the phase switches on, and that'll tell us which way is the proper way to do it. Okay, that sounds pretty good for the moment. Now we have a kick and snare, right? Now look at the hi-hat and the overheads. Again, they sound pretty good. I'm really likely not to do much of that. If I wanted to, I may put some compression over the overhead mics, but for demonstration purposes, we'll just leave it alone for right now. There's that hi-hat mic. Now on the hi-hat mic, I may come up here and put that high-pass filter on that I talked about earlier. The high-pass filter now is taking a lot of the lower frequency bass drum sound and it's taking it out of the hi-hat mic, and then it's going to allow some of that higher frequency to come true. We'll listen to the hi-hat mic isolated. We'll wait a moment till Connor plays a little bit of hi-hat, and then we can go back to that. Can I have some hi-hat, Connor? And there you go. Okay, let's hear the whole kit, please. And you can go back to the beat, please. Now as Connor's playing, as we're moving along into the track, I don't want to spend too much time getting the drums tweaked out, so to speak, so I'm going to work on the tom-toms as he's hitting them, as he's probably going to hit them more sporadically in the song. I'll have a chance to work with them as we go along. But essentially, that's going to be most of the drum set sound. There we go. Now, if I wanted to, I'd add a little bit of that reverb to the snare drum, and it may sound good. Let's see if we could do that. So as you can hear, I've added a little reverb to the snare drum just to give a little extra dimension to it. There we go. And if I wanted to, I could add that same reverb to the bass drum. I'll lower the return of the reverb a little bit, just in my control room mix. Great. So that's a good starting point. And as we move forward and record the music, I'll probably fine-tune the drums a little bit just to kind of really get them sitting well in the track. Great. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so now we're going to see what we can do with our guitar amp. We've got 3 microphones we set up earlier. We're going to have Daryl play, and we'll see what kind of sound we come up with. So right now, Daryl's going to play a little for us. There we go. Okay. So this is the 157 microphone that we put on the amplifier. And And there's that 421 that we put on the mic. So if we really listen closely, we could hear the 421 shapes the sound a little bit differently than the 57. The 57 sounds more of that high range, high mid punch, and the 421 has a little bit of that lower mid punch. So if we listen to both together, so again, we have the two mics with the same source. We want to double check the phase relationship of those microphones. So I'm going to take one of these phase reverse switches here and actually turn them on. So as you could hear, when I put the phase reverse in place and I reversed the phase of the microphones, the sound changed drastically. It got a lot thinner. That's not what we want. So I'll put the phase switch back, and that tells me that we're in the right place, they're phased correctly, we've got the maximum full sound. And then we're going to listen to the other microphone. Now this is the other 414 mic that I set up about 3 feet off of the amplifier. If we listen closely, the guitar sounds a little bit fuller or different or further away, as it were, for that microphone. And now we have all 3 microphones. So what I'll do is probably ultimately record all these 3 mics on 3 separate tracks so I can decide when I mix how much of each microphone I want in the overall sound. But I'm going to listen to the 57, put some of the 414 or the 421 in, and then add a little bit of the 414. If I want to, I could also pan or change the sound of one microphone to go to the left speaker, and one of the other microphones to go to the right speaker. Could you play some chords for me, please? So we can hear now. And again, if I wanted to, I could add a little reverb to that sound. So, as you can see, once you know what to look for and how to approach this, it's fairly easy to select the environment or the room to place your instruments, to select the microphones, to record those instruments, to actually take a look at or listen to the way those instruments are sounding in the room, maybe make your adjustments. Once you get on the control surface, just get those instruments kind of balanced in the mix. Certainly use some equalization, some processing to get them sounding a little more pristine. And a great starting point to make your recording. Of course, beyond that, it's going to be up to the performance. Real application training gives you the tools as an engineer to perhaps do some of this and have it become second nature so that in the long run you're going to be focusing more on making your music, writing your songs, producing your songs, and performing those songs. And the end result is going to be a great master quality sounding product. You're going to be thinking, acting, and performing like a real recording engineer. I want to thank you for joining me for this segment of Real Application Training. Thank you very much for allowing me to share this with you, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Real Application Training, the University of Recording Arts and Music. Okay, we're rolling.